With just a single piece of bread, the girl conquered the 5 most handsome men in the empire. She even made the noble lord willingly tattoo the flower of temptation onto his own body. She never expected things to turn out like this. Not too long ago, the infamous, peerless Villainess completely vanished one day, leaving the entire empire swarming with endless rumors. Yet the truth remained hidden. And now, the girl's fingers trembled as she stared at the clue she had finally found. This was the culprit who ruined her life. Rumor had it that Count Vasilian had been conducting cruel experiments on elves, and despite already having 3 heirs of his own, he was actually planning to adopt another child from the orphanage. To get her revenge, the girl drank a potion. The peerless Villainess transformed into a diaper warrior. She was preparing to infiltrate her enemy's family. Staring at her chubby little face in the mirror, and listening to the noisy wails of the brats around her, she sighed. It had already been a month. When on earth is he coming? Just as she was about to lose her mind, news of a noble's visit finally arrived. The girl waddled eagerly to the door. A luxurious carriage had pulled up, and the man stepping out was none other than Count Vasilian. Little hearts practically popped out of the girl's eyes. For the first time ever, her sworn enemy looked so incredibly welcoming. Among the crowd of children, she was undoubtedly the most eye-catching one. But the man just gave her a passing glance. He had absolutely no intention of adopting her. Deeply offended, the little girl threw a tantrum on the spot. She whipped out a rock-hard baguette, ready to teach him a lesson. But her fierce, stubborn little display instantly caught the man's interest. After learning her name was Chessa, she was suddenly scooped up into the air under her own suspicious glare. From today on, I am your daddy. She was completely speechless. This guy was way too casual. But was the plot really supposed to go like this? Inside the bumpy carriage, she started questioning her entire existence, while the man just kept smiling. He then offered her a welcome gift. What kind of gift? The 5-year-old toddler almost wet her pants. Was it some kind of magical control ring? She met the man's eyes. A true hunter must always keep up their disguise. After complaining that the bracelet was a bit too heavy, the man's gentle voice echoed. From now on, Daddy will give you anything you could ever want. The air suddenly grew terrifyingly cold. But, you have to grant Daddy one little wish, too. An ominous aura instantly engulfed the carriage. Was this the true face of the Vasilian family? But right then, the carriage was pulled over. It was the Holy Knights on a routine patrol. The months since the witch's disappearance had been just a little too peaceful. A terrifying thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Did this man know her true identity? As she panicked, the man flashed an eerie, chilling smile. The fact that I adopted a daughter must be kept a secret. The dark magic strictly forbidden by the Empire burst forth from his hands in an instant. The little girl's jaw dropped in shock. Thinking his new daughter was scared, the Count quickly snapped his fingers. Pitch black magic instantly swallowed the entire carriage. Staring at the massive building before her. So this was Count Vasilian's Snake Castle. The girl stared blankly at the ceiling. She never expected this man to go to such crazy lengths just to coax her to sleep. It had been a whole week since she arrived at the Count's estate. This man treats her like a little keychain, never leaving her side. He even patiently reads her fairy tales. She stares at him with total suspicion. I mean, in this fiercely religious empire, using black magic without permission means instant execution if you're caught. She instinctively tries to guess his motives. But who knew? The guy actually starts singing a lullaby. Singing is one thing, but being completely out of tune? What is that about? Ah, if only this was Mom's lullaby. Even though her memories of Mom are blurry now, that warm, gentle feeling still faintly echoes in her mind. Surprisingly, the man's scratchy voice unknowingly lulls the little girl right to sleep. When she opens her eyes again, the man has already been waiting for ages. He scoops her right up. Come here, let's go meet your big brothers. Very little is known about the 3 brothers. All we know is that the eldest is 13, and the younger twins are 11. Right after that, before she can even put up a fight, the man carries the little munchkin straight to the study. Hearing that he's about to head out, her long deadpan face finally lights up with a massive smile. Finally, some peace and quiet. But just then, the Count's eldest son walks into the study. The very second he spots her, his eyebrows pull into a deep, noticeable frown. Turns out, they're about to set off for the Black Forest. Ignoring the boy's weird glare, she mentally pops a giant question mark, thinking hard. What on earth are they doing there? The boy pauses for a moment. Even if you've lost your mind, don't drag innocent people into this. Talk about a messed up father-son dynamic. But the man just keeps smiling that bright, annoying smile. He laughs, gives her head a gentle pat, and turns to leave. After hesitating for a second, she finally blurts out what's been bothering her. Do I look like someone else? All those vague hints they've been dropping, and the extreme lengths they went to just to find a witch like her. It all makes her realize. This adoption was definitely no accident. But the man doesn't give her a straight answer. He just strokes her hair. We'll talk about this when I get back. But of course, she isn't just gonna sit around and wait. Well, if that's how it is, then I'll just dig up your little secrets myself. But just as a magic circle appears, right at that moment, A strong hand suddenly clamps over her mouth. Cut to outside the castle, where a guy is carrying little Chessa with one hand. He tosses her into a carriage overflowing with flowers. She just sits there, completely dumbfounded. Who am I? Where am I? What is even happening? She was fully prepared to just casually blast these two guys into oblivion. When a silhouette suddenly steps out of nowhere. It's the Count's third son, Basil. She stares at him, totally curious. But watch this. He walks right past the two kidnappers and heads straight for her. This is his very first time getting a close-up look at the kid his family adopted. Then, he reaches out his big, wicked hands and starts squishing her cheeks. The killers behind him, furious at being ignored, raise their swords, ready to end this arrogant brat. But as the flowers explode into the air, the two men are instantly blown into a million pieces. Meanwhile, Basil thoughtfully holds up an umbrella to shield her. Through her blocked line of sight, she can see a faint, chilling smile on Basil's lips. Well now, you don't seem scared at all, do you? Meanwhile, back in the study, their eldest brother, Belle, stares across the room. Basil casually plops this cute little thing right onto the desk. Neither of them mentions a single word about the near kidnapping. Their faces just show total, absolute approval of little Chessa's cuteness. Right after, the eldest brother shows some highly unusual concern about the real motive behind this adoption. He even plots to secretly send her away. But hey, she's no sitting duck. After she makes up a completely lame excuse to stay, both brothers look at her thinking, did this poor kid suffer some kind of mental shock? But Basil brought it up. The Count's treasonous plot to raise the dead. Life and death belong to the gods, yet the Count was actually harboring such a dark, twisted plan. The two of them were deeply disgusted by the Count's intention to use children as sacrifices. What are you talking about, my children? Hearing this, Chessa was suddenly struck by the memory of a dark secret from 15 years ago. The Count had married a woman who emerged from the Black Forest. But after giving birth to 3 children, the Countess died under bizarre circumstances one day, driving the Count completely insane. It finally clicked for Chessa. Was she adopted just to be used as a sacrifice? Just then, the Count stepped into the room. Meeting the little girl's suspicious gaze, he spoke. Chessa is my daughter. How could I ever use my precious little girl as a sacrifice? Daddy only has one simple request. Bring me the Elf Queen's crown. It was a holy relic of the sacred empire, something only children under the age of 5 were allowed to touch. And soon, the empire would hold a ceremony to bestow the crown upon the holiest child. Lying in bed, the girl thought about her impending future. She actually had to go and pray? Her villainous persona was completely falling apart. Plus, what if she ran into that man again? She would most likely end up dead. She only infiltrated this place to investigate their research on elves. How did the plot get this messed up? Thinking about all this, she decided to get the heck out of there before things got any weirder. Thankfully, she had packed some invisibility flowers in her bag just in case. Her little feet pattered quickly across the floor, but a petal slipped out and fell to the ground. A figure loomed right behind her. He picked up the fallen petal, looking confused. Seeing this, the girl sprinted even faster. A moment later, she stood frozen in the courtyard. She had just tripped, sending her invisibility flower flying. Thanks to that, the boy caught her red-handed. Left with no choice, Chessa started playing dumb. But the boy slowly leaned in, trying to find traces of the mysterious petals on her. He leaned down even closer, gently sniffing her hair. Just as her cover was about to be blown, the warning bells for an enemy invasion suddenly rang out. Suddenly, she felt herself being lifted into the air. Before she knew it, she was pressed tight against her brother's chest. Meanwhile, the Count maintained an incredibly calm and unfazed expression. This dismissive attitude deeply offended the royal messenger reading the decree, and a fierce argument quickly broke out. When she heard that she had to go to the royal palace too, Chessa was completely bewildered. They were supposed to leave for the palace immediately, overnight. But the Count just gave a faint smile. He then turned back to look at his youngest daughter, taking in her familiar scent. It turned out he had already noticed Chessa was missing from her bedroom and was just about to send the guards to find her. Carl, however, let out a scornful laugh. What a total disgrace. The tender way the man looked at his daughter was exactly how he used to look at the Countess. Is it because we look alike? But an elf's appearance is shaped purely by fantasy. The man didn't say a word. He just picked up his daughter and swiftly turned on his heel. They were heading to the palace tonight. The very next day, sitting inside the grand palace, the girl felt that escaping was now utterly impossible. As she waited for her royal audience, the heavy doors were suddenly thrown open. That all too familiar figure made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up instantly. It was Hailun, the heretic inquisitor, the man who held the absolute power of life and death over the entire empire. Since he had housed so many holy relics, he himself was praised as living proof of divinity. The moment the man walked through the doors, his eyes locked right onto Chessa. Staring at her striking pink eyes, his gaze slowly narrowed. He strode right up to her, and just as his hand was about to brush against her, the Count snatched his wrist in a flash. What do you think you're doing to my daughter? Hailun gently pulled his hand back, claiming the little girl just looked incredibly familiar. The tension in the room instantly spiked, thick and explosive. Thankfully, with the adjutant stepping in to smooth things over, the two men didn't break out into an all-out brawl, but the silent, deadly standoff between them never really stopped. Using the excuse of verifying the girl's identity, Hailun smoothly forced the Count to step outside. As the heavy doors slammed shut, it was just the two of them left in the room. The man's gaze was as sharp as an arrow, so piercing it made the little hairs on the back of the girl's neck stand straight up. Staring at her painfully familiar face, he asked, "Are you, Chessa's daughter?" That bombshell of a question practically made the girl's brain short-circuit. What on earth is this guy babbling about? As it turned out, her complicated history with this man stretched back a very, very long time. Once upon a time, she had actually begged him to put an end to her miserable, exhausting life. He refused. After that brief, fleeting encounter, they both went back to living their own separate lives. She never imagined that their paths would cross again, let alone in a crazy situation like this. Seeing that the little girl was too stunned to answer, the man slowly took a seat. She thought that was the end of it. But then, Hailun just... She quickly buried her head in the sofa, playing ostrich. But as his clothes were pulled open, peeking through her fingers, the girl spotted a bright rose tattoo just below the man's collarbone. Just then, the Count's voice suddenly cut through the room. "Do you have a death wish, Sir Hailun?" The Count slowly approached him. To think a rising knight like yourself would brand his own body with a witch's mark. But Hailun simply took his time putting his clothes back on. "Do you know Chessa?" That brief question was all it took for the Count to piece everything together. A heavy candlestick with sharp, pointed spikes was instantly pressed hard against Hailun's throat. "Chessa has absolutely nothing to do with her. Do not test my patience anymore." Hailun slowly stood up. "This time, I will be stepping in as an escort knight." "Well then, I suppose I'll see you then." The Count looked down at the child standing before him. All the harshness vanished from his face, instantly replaced by a warm, doting look. As for his brief disappearance earlier, he was simply off venting his fury on the Emperor, who had dared to hand his daughter over to a heretic inquisitor. Hoping to cheer his little girl up, the Count took Chessa for a stroll through the royal palace. "Tell Daddy what you'd like, sweetheart. Even if it's a whole castle, Daddy will buy it for you." Still, the girl easily saw through the deep worry lingering on his face. She reached up with her tiny hands and gently stroked the man's hair. "Don't worry, Chessa will always be on Daddy's side." But what the little girl didn't know was that her sweet gesture was exactly like the Countess's. A few days later, the girl was wandering around their villa in the capital. The Count's strange reaction had only made Chessa more curious. Desperate to uncover the truth, she completely abandoned her plans to run away. But the way her older brother and sister kept treating her like a toddler was seriously starting to give her a headache. What she didn't know was that from a third-floor window, another pair of eyes was quietly watching it all unfold. The once peaceful life of the Basilian family completely shattered after their mother passed away, along with the unborn child who tragically died in the womb. During the Count's terrifying descent into madness, the eldest son, Bel, had to shoulder the weight of the entire family far too early, carefully hiding his own fragile heart, because he had younger siblings to protect. Meanwhile, the Count's condition only grew worse. He abandoned absolutely everything, staying awake day and night by his late wife's lifeless body. He turned a deaf ear to Belle's desperate, tearful pleas, completely casting aside his duties as a Count. Until a twisted thought took hold. "That's right, I am Count Vasilian. Surely I can bring you back to life." That was the beginning of his absolute downfall. In Belle's eyes, his father was now nothing more than an empty shell, consumed by forbidden dark magic. Under his deranged plan to use the elf crown as a sacrifice to resurrect his dead wife, it was only a matter of time before their entire bloodline was wiped out. And Chessa, dragged into this mess, wouldn't be spared either. Looking at the fiercely protective twins in front of him, well, at least this new little sister adapted much faster than anyone expected. And he couldn't help but think back to that unborn child they had lost. If my real little sister had survived, she probably looked just like her, he thought. But the Count's cold voice shattered Belle's thoughts. Every conversation between father and son was laced with venom, thinking about the dark, twisted ritual about to take place, and the utter lack of hope in his father's eyes. Belle was overwhelmed with guilt for failing his mother's dying wish. Suddenly, the 13-year-old boy bravely raised his head. He had to stop him. He had to stop this ruthless, desperate man he called a father. The girl finally unleashed her overwhelming aura. The weapon she raised high was no longer just to protect herself. It was to avenge her brother. Just a short while ago, fighting over their little sister's affection, her two brothers had been spoiling her with a mountain of treats. This rare, heartwarming family moment brought a gentle smile to the observing maid. But then, Countess Rudin arrived for an unannounced visit. As the three siblings stepped out together, even the arrogant Countess was briefly stunned by their striking presence, seeing the very same noblewoman who had delivered the royal decree last time, here again on imperial orders to inspect Chessa, the newly adopted child. Her blatantly arrogant attitude instantly pissed Belle off. Highly perceptive as always, Xianxia quietly took it all in. As the teacup clinked back onto the saucer, Countess Rudin began her little performance, loudly dropping hints that Xianxia was nothing more than a filthy street orphan. Fortunately, Xianxia wasn't actually a naive toddler. She couldn't even be bothered to entertain such childish, petty insults. But those words made the hot-headed second brother, Carl, snap instantly. In a flash, his cold steel blade was drawn and pressed right against the woman's throat. Basil desperately wanted a piece of the action too, but holding little Xianxia in his arms, he could only let out a frustrated sigh. Enough. Belle's sharp voice cut through the chaos, bringing the dangerous farce to a halt. Even though his eyes were burning with absolute fury, the heavy burden of leading the family forced him to maintain his noble composure. Yet the young boy's painful restraint was met with even more vicious, unbridled mockery. Is this the grand Vasilian tradition? She sneered. Or are all motherless children just raised like wild beasts? Those cruel words struck a devastating blow to Belle's fragile heart. Listening to the arrogant woman violently slam the door on her way out, the frail young boy couldn't stop his entire body from shaking. After holding back his impulsive little brother, he silently turned and walked away alone. The heavy, suffocating tension in the room left Xianxia trembling. A crushing guilt washed over her. It was because of her that her brothers had to endure such nasty insults and abuse. Having been through the exact same pain in her past life, she completely understood the sheer agony tearing at Belle's heart. He must be hurting so much right now, she thought. She quickly scrambled out of Basil's arms, and sprinted out the door as fast as her little legs could carry her. Following a faint trace of magic, she made her way to a dark storage room. Peeking her tiny head around the corner, there she found him. That heartbroken, lonely silhouette. Because despite acting like the tough older brother, he was still just a deeply wounded 13-year-old boy. Xianxia softly tiptoed to her brother's side. She plopped down beside him, racking her brain trying to figure out how to comfort him. But before the clumsy girl could even get a word out, Belle put on a brave face and quickly explained, claiming he only stood up for her because she bore the family name. But Xianxia saw right through his hesitant words. She didn't say a word. She just quietly held out a flower to him. The simple, tender gesture made Belle's eyes widen in shock. Smelling the flowers, it makes you feel a little better. It was exactly how his mother had comforted him the very first time. The young man's deeply buried pain finally broke free. He couldn't hold it in anymore, and tears started streaming down his face. After a long, heavy silence, he finally managed to pull himself together. He just wanted to keep the promise he made to his mother. But the reckless behavior of the Count and his younger brothers terrified him. He was so scared that the family would completely fall apart one day, and that their ruin would drag Xianxia into an unimaginable nightmare. His words were still hanging in the air, but when he looked up, Xianxia was already walking away. The little girl didn't say anything else. She just quietly closed the door behind her. But thinking about that woman's vile insults, Xianxia's usually cold heart started burning with rage. It's so infuriating. In the blink of an eye, night fell. Count Rudin was kicking back and enjoying a peaceful evening, thinking about how he acted at Count Vasilian's estate earlier that day. Venting his anger without a single care in the world, his ego inflated even more. Slightly tipsy, he quickly drifted off to sleep. But right then, a shadowy figure silently appeared. Xianxia's body was absolutely radiating with surging magic. She descended into Rudin's dream like an unstoppable force. The arrogant Count Rudin from just moments ago was now nothing more than a pathetic rat, being toyed with mercilessly. Xianxia, now in her true, terrifying form, unleashed every ounce of her blazing fury. She wanted to finish him off with one fatal strike. But then she remembered the utter humiliation Belle and her brothers suffered earlier that day. So, she decided to drag out this little hunting game. Her brutal methods made Rudin break down, crying and begging for mercy over and over again. Finally, it was time for the endgame. Xianxia raised her weapon high into the air, but right at the exact moment she was about to strike, a sudden, overwhelming surge of magic completely shattered the nightmare she had crafted for Rudin. Just to be safe, Xianxia immediately decided to hide herself. But when she saw who had just walked in, she was absolutely stunned. It was her so-called deadbeat dad. Xianxia stayed hidden, watching closely from the shadows. With a single snap of Count Vasilian's fingers, the pathetic Rudin was about to experience the absolute darkest moment of his entire life. It seemed there was a much deeper, darker secret behind Xianxia's tragic fate. But right now, there was just too much overwhelming information to process. The girl who had come solely for revenge now wanted nothing more than to uncover the real truth. After Xianxia had taught Count Rudin a painful lesson, Keen had arrived right on her heels. True to his codename, the Snake. Under agonizing torture, Rudin kept crying out, begging desperately for mercy. Keen soaked in every second of Rudin's miserable pleading. But, thinking about his little girl waiting for him back home, he decided to speed things up. In the end, Rudin paid the ultimate price with his life for his cruel arrogance that day. Watching from the shadows, Xianxia saw the whole bloody thing unfold. She instinctively started worrying. Would he be punished by the Emperor for doing this? But the man just looked completely unfazed, like it was nothing at all. He casually played with his pocket watch, thinking to himself, I've got a little girl waiting at home. I'd better hurry back. Hearing that, Xianxia almost blew her cover in a panic. Crap, I have to get back right now. A few moments later, Xianxia sprinted all the way back to the mansion, only to nearly crash headfirst right into Keen. With a dark, intimidating look on his face, the man suddenly scooped the little girl up into his arms. She was terrified he had figured it out, but, to her shock, he just wanted to lovingly snuggle his daughter. Smelling the heavy stench of alcohol radiating off him, the girl quickly realized, her old man was completely wasted. But even so, he still hadn't forgotten about his daughter. Looking at the little cookie in her hands, the girl finally felt something she hadn't in a long time. The feeling of being cared for. Unlike Count Ruden's perspective, he was no longer that brutal count. Right now, he just seemed like a doting father. With a snap of the man's fingers, black magic enveloped the two of them once again. Time for bed, sweetheart. When she opened her eyes again, Keen was already lying beside her, ready to coax her to sleep. He gently patted the girl's head. Seeing him drop his usual smile, little Xianxia couldn't help but feel that her dad was acting strange today. Thinking back to Belle's emotional breakdown, and then looking at the man right in front of her, she sensed a similar kind of sorrow in him. Was it because of the countess? But the man didn't say a word. He had already fallen asleep. It seemed that lying next to his daughter gave him an unusual sense of peace. Over these past few days, little Xianxia had also started to feel the pull of fate. It seemed the mystery surrounding the countess was somehow connected to her. By now, she had quietly slipped out of bed, planning to dig up some useful information. Meanwhile, at Light Xiaxia's old hideout, the arrival of an uninvited guest completely shattered the quiet darkness. During those long, forgotten years, the man had traveled across more than half the empire. All just to find her, the woman who had left a permanent mark on his very soul. And today, he stood here as a heretic inquisitor. Number 8129. When is your master going to come and save you? On the other hand, Xianxia, completely unaware of what was happening outside, was busy rummaging through the archives for anything useful. Some loose pages that fell from a hidden gap in the bookshelf caught her eye. But the moment she read them, her pupils shrank in shock. It was actually an investigation report on Xianxia. The next morning, the Vasilian family had a rare breakfast gathering. But even as her father tried to feed her, Xianxia couldn't muster the slightest appetite. The report she found yesterday contained a detailed record of her entire past life. It had details that even she herself didn't fully remember. She couldn't help but wonder, what exactly was this man? What kind of role had he really been playing over these past 20 years? Was he persecuting her, or protecting her? Luckily, no one else seemed to notice Xiaxia's inner turmoil. Looking at the notice about Count Ruden in the newspaper, Belle instantly knew it was his father's doing. He glared intensely at the man, completely baffled as to why he suddenly cared so much about their family's honor. But the man just offered a faint smile. Remembering the insults Count Ruden had hurled at them, he wanted nothing more than to make him die a million times over. Honestly, letting him die so easily was almost a pity. Glancing over at his little daughter, Keen announced his final decision. He was going to bring their family back into the light. Hearing this, Belle was left in a daze. After all these years, this was the very first time his father was actually stepping up to lead the family. But quickly regaining his composure, he warned the man, telling him not to be so extreme with his methods in the future. The man didn't agree or disagree. He simply mentioned that a new tutor would be arriving soon, told them to take good care of Xianxia, and then turned on his heel and left. The second she saw Keen leave the house, Xianxia hopped right off her chair at the dining table. Hurrying back to her room, she tried to piece all the clues together. For Keen to have investigated her past, he definitely had to be connected to the underground world. The man knew about her unique tattoo, and he knew her every move like the back of his hand. Plus, the countess had passed away 7 years ago. The only missing piece right now was the elven crown. But why target an orphan like her? The tangled web of mysteries was driving Xianxia crazy. With a flick of her wrist, she released a magic butterfly, hoping to gather some intel from her underlings. But this tracking butterfly seemed to lose its target. In an instant, an ominous feeling washed over her mind. Just who the hell dared to touch my guy? This seemingly sweet and innocent girl was actually a notorious, unmatched villainess hiding in the shadows. After taking on the role of the Count's youngest daughter under the guise of an investigation, she unexpectedly ended up being completely adored by everyone. But just as she was soaking in this long-lost warmth, disaster quietly struck. On a stormy, rain-swept night, Xianxia rescued an abandoned little dog boy. Because of twisted elven experiments, he was completely unable to hide his puppy-like features. Looking at the poor man huddled on the ground, Xianxia used her magic. She completely concealed the very features that made him feel so insecure. This carefully hidden tenderness of hers was completely taken in by the man's eyes. Right then and there, he swore his absolute loyalty to Xianxia. But the girl had no intention of keeping this little puppy around, simply because she was terrified her notorious reputation would bring him nothing but disaster. Her icy attitude left a deep, unmistakable disappointment etched across his face. Yet, he still hovered around Xianxia day after day, brewing special elven potions just for her. He ran through every street and alley to gather intel for her, and even crafted the most exquisite jewelry for her. In the end, Xianxia just couldn't resist. She took in this man named Shada. In a world that entirely shunned and despised her, someone was actually willing to run toward her. But today, something terrible actually happened to this very special man. Little Chessa was just sneaking around, getting ready to slip away. But the moment she opened the door, she was shocked to find all her brothers standing right outside. Basil gently patted the little girl's head, telling her they had to head out for an urgent matter. Then, with Carl rushing them along, they hurried out the door. Chessa just stood there staring blankly. This stroke of luck came way too suddenly. In the blink of an eye, the girl found herself staring at her completely trashed hideout. Her mood instantly plummeted, and memories of the past began flashing through her mind. She couldn't even bear to imagine what would happen if that man had been killed. After hitting a hidden switch, she stepped into the hideout's secret room. There, sitting right in plain sight, she found the potion he had prepared for her in advance. But seriously, what the heck was up with this heart-shaped bottle? Right at that moment, a sudden noise echoed through the room. The very brother who supposedly left on an urgent errand was actually here. With no time to overthink, she instantly downed the potion, and completely restored her true, original appearance. And the very second she used her teleportation magic, Carl managed to find this hidden room at almost the exact same time. Sniffing the lingering fragrance in the air, it smelled so much like his little sister's scent. Carl slowly stepped inside, only to find an empty glass bottle left on the floor. A brief moment later, Xianxia suddenly materialized right in the middle of the city district. Her sudden appearance instantly sparked a massive commotion among the crowd. After doing a bit of digging, she quickly pieced together exactly what had gone down. The Nova Knights had barged into her hideout and forcefully dragged Shada away as a hostage. When it came down to it, they were really just doing this to get to her. Even knowing exactly what they were scheming, Xianxia still chose to walk right into their trap, loudly declaring her fiery return to the entire world. And playing the role of the perfect prey, she quickly drew the intense gaze of the hunters. Man offered a perfectly polite apology, introducing himself as a loyal subordinate of the master. He claimed he was sent by the master's orders to personally escort her. The girl's eyes flickered slightly. To think the absolute leader of the underworld would actually get involved in this. They were a ghost organization, completely off the grid. They were the true, undisputed rulers of the underworld. You see, this land originally belonged to the Valen Empire, until a sudden curse rained down upon it one day, twisting it into a dead wasteland where absolutely nothing could grow. And within this godforsaken, abandoned wasteland, outcasts who couldn't survive in any other empire began to gather. After years of chaotic evolution, this place eventually became a massive neutral zone where all the major power players converged. Thinking about all this, only the master could maintain the barest minimum of order here. Xianxia didn't put up much of a fight. She just wanted to find her little puppy. Led by the man, she arrived at a grand palace, hidden deep beneath the barren wasteland. It was her very first time, getting an up-close look at this massive organization. As she stepped into the side hall, the man behind the curtain finally spoke. "This is the first time we've met." But even just standing in the same room, made Xianxia feel an overwhelming, crushing pressure. Still, she stood her ground, completely unfazed. She told him to just cut to the chase. "Even if you are a heretic inquisitor of the Holy Empire, you have no right to interfere with the underworld's affairs." And the reckless inquisitor this time, turned out to be a man deeply tied to Xianxia. In a flash, she figured it out. The only person connected to her, was that man, Hailun. She tried to deny it, but the mastermind knew all about the mark she had left on him. Before she could even get a word in, the man laid out his true intentions. He approved of what she'd done. As long as she took care of that heretic inquisitor, the rest of the higher-ups wouldn't ask any questions. Hearing this, she turned on her heel and walked away, politely declining an escort from the blindfolded man. The mark she had left on Hailun allowed her to pinpoint his exact location. With a flash of teleportation magic, she appeared right where he was in an instant. But the sight that met her eyes, was the boy, heavily bound in iron chains. "To think you'd actually risk your life for a mere prisoner?" The man spoke slowly, even though she had braced herself. Xianxia still couldn't understand why he would do such a thing. The moonlight spilled through the window, bathing them both in its glow. For Hailun to go through all this trouble, just to find out why she had abandoned him all those years ago. The girl had fallen to her knees before him, begging him to just let her die. And that was her very first meeting with Hailun. 5 years ago, when Xianxia first awakened her elven powers. She brought down a never-ending hunt upon herself. Powerless to fight back, she could only suffer through this cruel twist of fate in silence. But then, the boy appeared before her, and gave her a tiny sliver of hope. The hope of dying with dignity. She pleaded with him, begged the boy to end her miserable life. But when she opened her eyes again, Xianxia found herself lying in an unfamiliar bed. Assuming she had finally been caught by the hunters, the girl broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Why is even dying too much to ask for? The malice of the world felt like an inescapable net, trapping her completely. Maybe dying by his hands would have been a relief. Just then, the very face she was picturing suddenly appeared right outside the door. Xianxia snatched up a heavy candlestick, ready to fight for her life. But the boy just calmly set down a tray of food. Seeing her completely on edge, he casually picked up a piece of bread and took a slow bite, chewing quietly to show her the food was perfectly safe. The girl froze. Even after enduring countless bitter betrayals, some mysterious instinct told her to trust him. She grabbed the food and started wolfing it down eagerly. She hadn't had a real meal in ages. In mere seconds, she devoured absolutely everything. The boy quietly gathered the empty plates. His gaze lingered on the girl's face. Despite the scars and the hardship, her delicate beauty remained completely untouched. He opened his mouth to speak, but the brilliant moonlight playing across the room stole the moment. A soft silver light danced across her features, as the girl tilted her head back, lost in a peaceful trance. It feels like it's been forever since she stopped to take in the beauty of the world. She turned her head toward the boy. Thank you, for helping me. This sudden shift made the young boy blush bright red. He stammered out that he was merely an apprentice knight of the Holy Empire, and that it was just his duty. But those words threw the girl right back into a panic. The Holy Empire had zero tolerance for heretics. If he found out she was an elf, she couldn't even imagine the fate that awaited her. But just as she was scheming to run away, the boy simply draped a blanket over her with a gentle touch. Get some sleep, don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you. And so, the young girl's escape plan completely fell apart when she came down with a fever. During the few days he carefully nursed her back to health, she started developing feelings for him. Not only did she fail to escape, but now she owed him her life. She wondered why he'd even bothered to save her. But the boy offered no explanation. My name is Hailoon. I hope you'll remember me. Xianxia froze, but a sudden shout from outside shattered the delicate moment between them. The two of them looked out the window. The hunters tracking Xianxia had arrived. The girl immediately panicked. She didn't want to drag this kind boy down with her. There were just way too many of them. She tried to tell him to leave her behind and run, but he wasn't having any of it. It turned out that over the past few days of caring for her, he had been sneaking out, quietly eliminating the threats haunting her. By now, there were barely any hunters left. Ignoring her stunned expression, he grabbed his weapon and turned to leave. I just want you to live. But little did he know, his kindness only pushed them further apart. He's a good person, but he'd be better off without me. Xianxia knew exactly what position he was in. The young knight had a limitless future ahead of him. Meanwhile, as an elf, a heretic in the eyes of the Holy Empire, she refused to be a stumbling block in his path. She took one last look at the little cabin, then leapt out and disappeared into the night. Over the next 5 years on the run, Xianxia hardened, blooming into a deadly rose with sharp thorns. She slaughtered countless hunters who came after her. Still, she would sometimes think back to the boy from that night. How is he doing now? Would he ever forgive me for walking away? Or has he joined the ranks of those hunting me down? Amidst her doubts, fate finally delivered a cruel answer. Walking completely opposite paths, they had become each other's sworn enemies. The girl, lost in her long memories, suddenly snapped back to reality by his voice. Are you still not going to give me an answer this time? But she had no idea what to say. Noticing her visible struggle, the man gently changed the subject. Where did you run off to lately? His soft tone caught her off guard. I thought we were finally going to end things today. Suddenly, a wave of intense nausea hit her hard. Oh no, the potion was wearing off right now. Was her disguise about to drop right in front of him? They were supposed to be on entirely opposite sides, sworn enemies out for blood. But it seemed the man standing before her didn't feel the same way. He was treading lightly, gently asking where she had been, but he never got the chance to hear her answer. A strange sensation ripped through Xianxia's body. Of all times, she was transforming back into little Chessa right now. Only one thought raced through her mind. I absolutely cannot blow my cover and die of embarrassment right now. Her magic flared up violently. Just as her spell flashed, she grabbed a bag of flour, smashed it right into Hailoon's face, and narrowly teleported away at the very last second. Little Chessa let out a massive sigh of relief. Seizing the brief moment of safety, she quickly used her magic to transform back into an adult, but right at that moment, Hailoon caught up to her. Xianxia's frantic scramble had his head spinning. Instinctively assuming the girl was trying to run away again, Shada tried to lunge forward to block him. But Xianxia held him back with one hand. After all these years, their eyes finally met again. She knew all too well the uncrossable divide between them. Staring at the man who had become a heretic inquisitor, the very last shred of hope for them was completely shattered. Xianxia flared her magic, pulling out the sacred relic the entire empire lusted after. The Spear of Rubes. She offered it in exchange for their safe passage. But before she could even finish, he closed the distance between them. She thought he was going to refuse, so she blurted out a threat to destroy the relic. But Hailoon? He just stared at her, perfectly calm. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. The sudden silence left Xianxia completely confused. What is he doing? Why isn't he saying anything? A moment later, Hailun finally spoke. He just couldn't understand why she was so desperate to push him away. He stepped closer, and gently pinched her cheek. The only one who gets to stand by your side, is me. Is someone after you, or is it, because of your daughter? Those words made a vein throb in Xianxia's forehead. How long is this idiot going to keep misunderstanding? And the worst part? She couldn't even explain herself. Whatever. Xianxia hurled the sacred relic right at him. I'll take that as a yes to our deal. With that, she instantly teleported away, escaping that nightmare of a situation. The next day at the Vasilian estate. Thanks for the food. Little Chessa happily sipped her milk tea, munching on the lavish pastries her older brothers had prepared. Yesterday was the very first time her potion had ever failed. Thank goodness no one caught her. But why would a flawless potion suddenly wear off like that? I definitely need to interrogate Shada about this next time. She sneakily glanced at her two brothers bickering in front of her. Their sudden visit made her realize something. Things weren't going to be that simple. The hidden world wasn't a place you could just stroll into. The Vasilian family definitely had some deep, dark secrets. Right as she was lost in thought, Chessa suddenly caught a whiff of a very familiar scent. Rustle, rustle. Something was moving in the bushes. A tiny puppy came tumbling out, spinning in circles right in front of everyone. Chessa's brain completely short-circuited. Shada had warned her yesterday that he'd come looking for her, but she didn't think he'd actually do it. Chessa panicked and lunged at the puppy. She tried to shoo him away before anyone noticed, but it was way too late. Her two older brothers had already spotted the whole thing, completely mistaking her panic for pure affection. They immediately declared they were adopting the dog. Watching the disaster unfold, only one thought crossed Chessa's mind. I am so dead. But clearly, her brothers were completely oblivious to her suffering. Desperate, Chessa shot a pleading look at her father, hoping he would shoot the ridiculous idea down. But to her absolute shock, Keen just took one glance and immediately agreed. Later at the dinner table, Chessa watched her brothers throw an absolute fit. It turned out the royal family's grand banquet was just around the corner, and the custom outfits they ordered were a total disaster. The two of them were fuming with righteous anger, while little Chessa just kept munching on her food, completely unfazed. Basil shook his head in frustration. This was going to be their little sister Chessa's official debut in high society. Everything had to be absolutely perfect. In the blink of an eye, Basil had sprinted across 8 different streets, commissioning the most obscenely expensive gown for his little sister. Watching Bakar painstakingly mix and match her accessories, she suddenly realized something about his past appearances. He had always been obsessed with dressing up. Completely bewildered, Chessa couldn't help but ask him why. Basil thought about it for a moment, then admitted with a shrug that he was just used to keeping up appearances. He hated looking like a boy who didn't have a mother to dress him. It turned out that ever since the Countess passed away, Father and Belle were often away from home. Being so young, he and Carl didn't quite grasp the concept of death yet. They thought their mom had just gone on a long trip. So, whenever he had the chance, he would try to go out and bring her back home. That is, until one day, he heard the cruel, mocking whispers of others. They laughed that even though Basil came from a noble family, he dressed like an uneducated beggar. In that agonizing moment, the true meaning of death finally hit him. He realized, his mom was never coming back. The little girl's genuine warmth completely shattered the darkness inside the executioner's heart. And the truth about Vasilian finally came to light. Little Chessa lay in bed, tossing and turning, completely unable to sleep. Her mind was entirely on the seemingly cheerful Basil, and the deep vulnerability he kept hidden inside. Remembering how the royal tailors had deliberately made things difficult for him, an idea suddenly sparked in her mind. She was going to open a boutique. The very next day, intending to buy some accessories for their little sister. The two brothers were getting ready to head down to the underworld. But Chessa eagerly volunteered, begging to tag along. The brothers looked down at the tiny girl, thinking she was just being silly and making an innocent joke. But she argued that this would be her very first time going out since she arrived, putting on the most heartbreaking, pitiful pout. Seeing how ridiculously cute she looked, Basil completely melted. He even wanted to dig out the allowance he had hidden in a bird's nest just to give it all to her. Chessa flashed a triumphant little smirk, successfully securing her spot to follow her brothers into the underworld. Bit by bit, the hidden truths of their family were being unraveled, as their carriage rolled further and further into the distance. The two brothers patiently warned Chessa, making her promise never to tell their oldest brother about this. The underworld was nothing like the glamorous capital of the empire. The moment they arrived, the three of them headed straight into the alleyways. After taking a few winding turns, they pushed open the door to a quaint little hat shop. But little did the brothers know, this place was actually Chessa's secret turf. Listening to her brothers shower the shop with praise, they were completely clueless that the boss was the little brat currently sitting in their arms. Shada, perfectly on cue, made his entrance already changed into his work clothes. Just as Shada was about to introduce their products, Carl, with his incredibly sharp sense of smell, caught a familiar scent on him. "Ah, you smell just like our dog." That single sentence nearly gave the other three a heart attack. Chessa and Shada were terrified their cover was blown. Meanwhile, Basil was just panicking that Carl's blunt comment would make him look like a total brute in front of their little sister. Thank goodness, Carl didn't dwell on it. He simply turned around and went back to picking out presents for her. Looking at a room packed with exquisite lil top hats, Basil was buzzing with excitement, absolutely dying to try them on his baby sister. Seeing his tiny sister dressed up so adorably hit Basil's heart like a massive, soft hammer of cuteness. There was no need to even choose between the hats. Basil dramatically whipped out his card. Buy them, let's buy them all. But right at that moment, Carl spoke up again. You guys sell potions here too? The last time I was around, I swore I saw a fairy or something. Shada's fur practically stood on end from sheer terror. Thank goodness Basil swept in to save the day once again. He played it off, saying Carl had been acting super weird all day. You're looking for a fairy, huh? Well, I've got one right here in my arms. Having dodged yet another bullet, poor Chessa was literally sweating bullets. Taking the subtle hint from Chessa's frantic glaring, Shada quickly offered to show them to the boutique next door. That's when an incredibly eccentric, edgy cat monster of a manager appeared before them. His utterly bizarre getup made all three of them cringe hard. Fortunately, the manager's craftsmanship and taste were actually top tier. With just a single sweeping glance at the trio, he had already visualized the perfect theme for their formal wear. While he was busy hashing out the tiny details with Basil, Carl's eyes suddenly darted to the side. He was acting uncharacteristically on edge today. Outside, the dust was swirling, but there wasn't a single soul in sight. However, the moment the three of them stepped out of the boutique, Carl sensed an immediate threat. Running purely on instinct, he slashed his blade through the air. With one swift motion, he sliced a massive trap net clean in half. Basil instantly pulled his little sister into a fierce, protective embrace. Carl drew both of his swords as a gang of ruthless thugs emerged from the shadows right in front of them. These were the absolute dregs of the underworld. Seeing three clearly wealthy targets, the street trash had immediately moved in for the kill. Veins throbbed furiously on Basil's forehead. His perfect day out with his sweet little sister was being completely ruined by this garbage. Crossing his twin blades fiercely in front of his chest, Carl charged straight at the bandits with killing intent. Just as the sharp blade was about to fall, his body suddenly froze. The familiar blindfolded man stepped out from the shadows. The master didn't want any more trouble. This was a world of chaos, where even crimes went entirely unpunished. The blindfolded man even seemed annoyed that Carl had caused a scene. This eerie atmosphere made Chessa freeze in surprise. Sihan was the master's highest-ranking direct subordinate. He was also known as the symbol of misfortune. In this chaotic underworld, his very presence meant death. Chessa grew even more confused. Just who was this master, anyway? To have their eyes drawn by such a minor scuffle, it only made her more curious about Vasilian's secrets. Just then, Sihan fixed his gaze on Chessa, who was tucked safely in Basil's arms. Her mind was still spinning with questions, but Sihan simply offered a polite bow. He didn't say the usual goodbye. Instead, he told her that they shouldn't meet again. She thought he was just naturally cold-hearted. But Sihan shook his head. Getting involved with someone like me will only bring you misfortune. His words carried a heavy sense of self-loathing, and that deep hatred for himself sparked painful memories for the young girl. Once branded as the daughter of a mad elf, Chessa's own childhood had been just as dark as his. She looked up. She responded to him with a bright, warm smile. Make sure you say hi next time we meet, okay? Sihan's face remained completely unreadable. He let the three of them pass, then turned and walked away. Later that night, no one witnessed the brutal violence unfolding in the dark alley. A man swung a leather whip mercilessly. His targets were the very same thugs who had tried to rob them earlier that day. As he thought of her sweet, innocent face from earlier, the hand gripping the whip trembled slightly. It was the very first time someone had ever shown him such genuine kindness in his miserable life. Even though he desperately wanted to see her again, he simply didn't dare, all because that little girl's father was Count Vasilian. He was also the underground world's true king. Count Vasilian's real identity was the undisputed ruler of the underworld. Meanwhile, back at the villa, the three siblings stood nervously in a row, enduring a harsh interrogation from their eldest brother, Bel. Basil argued that he just wanted to take his little sister out to play, but Bel shook his head in disapproval. When Carl insisted he was strong enough to protect her, Bel's words dropped like a heavy hammer, crushing everyone's hearts. Despite Basil's angry protests, Carl just coldly stated, Chessa has absolutely nothing to do with this family. The young girl's lips parted slightly, but she couldn't force a single word out. Bel had warned her long ago that he would cut her off from the family. Sure, they looked out for each other, but they were never truly family. She clenched her fists tightly. How foolish of her to actually want to attend that banquet, and to go after Count Rudin for insulting the Vasilian name. Also, she wouldn't embarrass them, putting her heart and soul into preparing that dress. All of this has absolutely nothing to do with me. She used to think Bel was someone who actually cared, but now, all she got from him was an incredibly cold, empty stare. Chessa let her arms drop in defeat. She cursed herself for selfishly changing her plans, instead of just leaving right after her investigation was done. She was going to cut all ties with this family, and just go back to being her old self. Back in her room, Chessa couldn't stop the crushing wave of sadness washing over her. She walked over to the window, completely unaware of the dense, dark shadows pooling together right behind her. The second she turned around, a massive surge of dark magic exploded into the room. Duke Vasilian materialized out of nowhere. The imposing man stared down at his daughter. He gently flicked her nose. "What's with that look? Looks like Belle really gave you an earful, huh?" Chessa awkwardly touched the corner of her mouth. It seems everyone already knew about her trip to the underworld. Keen didn't say much else. He just scooped the little girl up in his arms. "Since your big brother was the one who scolded you, then Daddy will just have to comfort you." Bathed in a soft glow of magic, they were instantly teleported to a garden. Looking at the sea of blooming roses, the world around them seemed to stand still. The rich scent of roses filling the air made the little girl instinctively close her eyes. But then, Chessa's eyes snapped wide open. She curiously asked where they were. The man's answer, however, nearly made her heart leap right out of her chest. They were actually in the Imperial Palace courtyard. He was strolling through the royal grounds like it was a local farmer's market. Keen simply chuckled, gently brushing the dust off his daughter's clothes. "This place is perfect for my little girl." As if reading her mind, he added, "You're pretty upset about your brother yelling at you, aren't you?" Chessa stayed silent for a moment, before finally blurting out the question, "Daddy, do you go to the underworld too?" Question clearly caught him off guard. The little girl just clenched her tiny fists. "It's okay. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I'm not a real Vasilian anyway." Hearing those words, the air around Keen seemed to swirl. He pulled his daughter into a tight hug. "This is a special secret, just for my Chessa," he whispered, leaning close to her ear. "What Daddy does in the underworld is take care of the people there, exactly the same way I take care of you." Suddenly, all the pieces clicked together. Chessa finally figured out the dark secret of the Vasilian family. That background check report on her. That time the three brothers showed up at the syndicate base. That was all because of Hailoon's connections. Not to mention the subtle, unquestioning loyalty the underworld master's henchmen showed the brothers. Her own father was actually the master of the underworld she had been negotiating with. This mind-blowing realization completely short-circuited Chessa's brain. Right now, only one thought echoed in her mind. Run, now. Chessa had finally uncovered the horrifying truth hidden within the Black Forest. The monster who tortured her mother actually pointed straight back to the Holy Empire, the supposed symbol of justice. Not too long ago, Count Vasilian's true identity was completely exposed. Chessa sat on the edge of her bed, terrified. She couldn't even imagine the fallout if her own fake identity was blown. And so, the escape plan was born. Belle had already made up his mind to send her away anyway. That she might as well just ride the wave and leave this whole mess behind. Watching her little dog, Shada, bouncing around happily, her expression darkened. "Stop playing around. We're making a run for it." Little Chessa pressed her ear against the door, sneaking around like a little spy. She had to gather as much intel as possible before bolting. She had already searched the entire castle top to bottom. The only place left was the most mysterious spot in the entire territory, the Black Forest. With a flash of elven magic, little Chessa touched down, instantly hit by the suffocating, dark aura lingering in the air. Thank God elves have the strongest mental fortitude of any race. Thinking back to Keen's spaced-out moments, she realized it was probably from spending too much time in this cursed forest. But Shada's sudden barking snapped her out of her thoughts. A ghostly, floating shadow materialized right in front of them. The creepy vibes of this place were off the charts. Yet, finding out exactly why Keen came here only fueled the girl's curiosity. Seeing that the monster wasn't hostile, little Chessa decided she better hurry up and investigate. Chanting softly in Elvish, she summoned countless tracking butterflies that fluttered out into the darkness. In just a matter of seconds, following the glowing trail of the butterflies, little Chessa chased after their light. She stumbled upon a hidden sanctuary deep within the gloomy forest, and something strange immediately caught her eye. Her eyes widened in shock. It was the grave of the late countess. Seeing the fresh flowers and neat decorations resting on top, it was obvious that over all these years, that man had been taking great care of it. Just then, the spirits guided her once more. Following their glow, she looked up at the trees, and gasped. The bark was entirely covered in dense, frantic writing. It was a detailed log, documenting horrific experiments on elves. And these records were actual lab notes from the Holy Empire, dating back hundreds of years. She couldn't believe her eyes. The Holy Empire, the very symbol of order and justice, was secretly conducting these twisted experiments? Even Hailoon, the sole heretic inquisitor, had no idea. Which meant there was only one terrifying possibility. The supreme leader of the empire, the cardinal himself, was personally running these experiments. A chilling realization hit her. Elves were famous for their incredibly powerful minds. Yet her own mother had become the mad elf that everyone whispered about. She didn't even dare to imagine the pure agony her mother must have endured. Chessa's magic flared up, spiraling violently out of control. I promise, I will avenge you, she swore. Thankfully, a soft whine from her little dog pulled her back to reality, helping her calm down. The only thing she knew for sure right now was that the Vassilian family had absolutely nothing to do with this. But she couldn't help but wonder, was Keen's investigation aiming for the exact same goal as hers? Well, it didn't matter anymore. The only certain thing right now was that she had absolutely no reason to stay with the Vassilians. Chessa's fate had taken yet another sharp turn. She was finally leaving this place. A place she never truly belonged to anyway. She buried any lingering sadness deep within her heart. She knew exactly what would happen if her true identity was exposed. Her father's warmth, her brother's gentle smiles, all of it would vanish in an instant. But Belle's actions completely caught everyone off guard. When he talked about leaving, he actually meant running away with Chessa. Later that afternoon, Chessa quietly walked into Belle's office. Even though her mind was racing with things to say, the words just got stuck in her throat. Belle noticed her troubled expression, but he just stayed silent. After what felt like an eternity, Chessa took a few tiny, hesitant steps forward. So, when should I leave? She kept her head firmly down, staring at the floor. But she knew the truth perfectly well. She had absolutely no right to stay here anymore. To her, Belle kicking her out was just the logical end to it all. If there's anything you want, just take it with you. I can even set you up with some money if you need it. Belle's offer completely stunned her. She thought about it for a brief second, then softly replied, "I'll just take my little dog." That was the only thing she truly needed. After all, when she first arrived, she had come with absolutely nothing. Even though she was being sent away, she looked up at him and gave a bright, genuine smile. "Thank you for everything. Everyone in the Count's family has been so wonderful to me." Belle just froze, totally blindsided by her response. His hand twitched nervously by his side, as he stared down at her innocent face. "You must have felt at least some attachment to this place. Why aren't you begging me to let you stay? If you really don't want to leave, you should at least show it." Chessa's eerie calmness was driving Belle crazy for the very first time. But the girl just gave a faint, empty shrug. "What's the point? It's not like wanting to stay magically means I get to stay." The sad truth was, she was completely used to being thrown away. 10 years ago, during her very first adoption, just because she accidentally stained a rug, she was ruthlessly thrown out onto the streets. That was the first time she learned a harsh lesson. You can't keep what was never yours to begin with. This was the most helpless time in Lydia's life, but the doors of the orphanage opened for her once again. The young girl looked completely devastated, but her teacher didn't ask why she had come back. Instead, seeing her so utterly broken, she just pulled her frail little body into a tight, warm embrace. "Why didn't you come back sooner?" she whispered. "Even though I don't have much, I can still take care of you. If you don't want to be adopted, then just stay here at the orphanage. This is your home now." Hearing those words, Lydia completely broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Her teacher was the very first ray of light in her dark life. She once truly believed she was a lucky child. But then, that terrifying fire happened. It burned all her hopes to ashes. In the end, she was left all alone again. So, for the situation playing out right in front of her, she had already prepared herself for the worst. After a brief, heavy silence, Belle finally made his decision. "In 2 days, the Count and the twins will be gone. We'll leave that night." Having received her answer, the girl readied herself as well. Once she left, she would drink the potion, return to her true form, and erase this girl's identity from the world forever. The next day, Chessa leaned against the balcony, feeling the gentle breeze. Having a clear answer actually brought her a strange sense of relief. Still, she might end up missing this manor. And those wonderful twins, too. Her only regret was that she couldn't say a proper goodbye in person. She gently waved her hand in their direction. "Maybe we'll cross paths again in the afterworld," she thought. But remembering Keen's status as a master made her shrink back a little. Regardless, she just wanted to make sure everyone would go on to live a good life. But what she hadn't noticed was that ever since she arrived at the Count's estate, her plans had a funny way of falling apart. The promised time arrived before she knew it. In the dead of night, she had everything packed and ready. With the Count and the Basil brothers away from the estate, she could slip away without making a single sound. Just before she left, Chessa bowed gracefully to Belle, exactly like she did on the day she first arrived. Even though she was leaving, she was incredibly deeply grateful for the time they had spent together. But Belle just stared at her, utterly silent. After a long pause, he finally spoke, saying that he was coming with her. That decision completely short-circuited her brain. "What?" she asked, staring at him in sheer disbelief. Belle's answer caught her entirely off guard. It turned out, during his darkest, most broken moments, the bouquet of flowers Chessa had given him had quietly become the light that warmed his soul. Whatever his reasons were, he wanted to give that precious warmth back to her. And as for his duties, let his old man, the Count, deal with that headache. The usually reliable guard went full on unhinged mode. To elope with his sister and leave absolutely no evidence behind, Belle actually blew up the entire Count's mansion, just a little while ago, to make sure Chessa would leave without looking back. Belle played the harsh older brother, burying his gentle feelings deep down and coldly ordering her to leave. Without a doubt, being kicked out like that stung her straight to the heart. But it was just another painful goodbye. This time, Chessa chose to accept her fate calmly. It was just a shame to lose the hard-won warmth she'd felt these past few days. Her only real regret was not getting to say a proper goodbye. But then, on the very night she was meant to leave, Belle packed his bags to hit the road with her. That decision left Chessa completely stunned. Ever since the Countess passed away, Keen had completely lost himself to the afterworld. All the political affairs of the entire territory had been handled by. As the eldest brother, Belle took full control. He let out a soft chuckle. I'll let father deal with the rest. His real reason for coming along was simply to keep Chessa hidden for as long as possible. At least until the Empire's prayer assembly began. That was the only way she'd be truly safe. He refused to let Chessa get dragged into the madness of resurrecting the Countess. Chessa didn't argue. The potion meant to restore her into an adult was incredibly unstable right now. Brewing a new batch would take time. Together, they stepped into the carriage and left. Chessa looked out the window, a pang of reluctance in her heart. But as she turned her head, she noticed Belle pulling something out. That familiar rune. It looked like some kind of detonator. But she quickly brushed the thought away. There was no way Belle would do something that crazy, right? The very next second, a massive explosion ripped through the estate. Chessa's mind completely blanked. She couldn't believe her own eyes. The entire Count's manor was swallowed by a sea of flames. She couldn't wrap her head around it. How could he cause such an absolute disaster? Meanwhile, Keen was running into some trouble of his own. Though, the endless waves of assassins only seemed to thrill him. Oddly enough, though, these assassins seemed to know his every move like the back of their hands. Before he could figure out why, an urgent report arrived. The manor was under attack. A massive explosion had set the entire estate ablaze. Luckily, there were no casualties. Hearing this, he ordered his men to send Basil and the others back, before instantly teleporting to the manor. Staring at the raging inferno, he couldn't even use dark magic to put it out, thanks to the massive crowd gathering around. Even if he managed to extinguish it, dealing with the aftermath would waste way too much of his time. The assassins, the fire, it was all designed to stall him. He instantly knew this was Belle's doing. But when he heard that Chessa had gone missing too, Keen completely lost his cool. He marched straight into the roaring flames and kicked Chessa's door wide open. The sight of her empty room drove the man to the brink of absolute madness. Where is my daughter? On the other side of town, Belle had arrived at a hotel to lay low, planning to set off the following day. Chessa was sitting there like a perfectly obedient little girl, but now that they had left the family, she started calling Belle young master. This instantly annoyed him. Call me brother, even though she didn't get why he was so obsessed with the title. She obediently nodded her head. Surprisingly, she was actually starting to enjoy this life on the run. Belle's constant care made her feel incredibly relaxed. Back then, she was always so buried in her work. But this was the very first time Chessa had ever seen him wield a sword. Come to think of it, the swords of the Vasilian family were completely unique. Belle explained that they were actually demonic blades. Dark blades forged exclusively for the heir of the Vasilian county. As it turned out, deep within the black forest of their territory, lurked unspeakable monsters. Horrors that even the Empire knew almost nothing about. Most people just brushed them off as local ghost stories. But that castle in the dark forest was a symbol of the Vasilian family's ancient duty to keep those monsters in check. To forge a demonic blade, it required an endless, non-stop supply of fresh blood. Wielding a weapon like this meant taking on the ultimate duty of slaughtering those monsters. But the endless bloodshed felt more like a death curse placed upon the Vasilian family. Hearing this dark family secret, Chessa's eyes went wide with shock. Belle just nonchalantly sheathed his magic sword. He was simply giving a veiled explanation for why he sent Chessa away. When it came to bedtime, Belle acted exactly like his father. Even the way he coaxed her to sleep was identical. He gazed softly at the little girl's peaceful, sleeping face. Time seemed to slip away in a daze. He couldn't help but feel that his time with Chessa was always far too short. Right now, only one thought filled his mind. If only you were truly my little sister. Chessa's escape plan had just received a massive assist. Desperate to get his sister out of there, Belle didn't hesitate to blow up the entire estate. He was completely disgusted by his father's schemes, which had dragged his innocent sister into terrible danger. But the Duke's relentless pursuit was already closing in. Keen stared blankly into Chessa's empty room. At this moment, an indescribable surge of emotion twisted in his heart. The setting sun poured through the window, bathing the room in golden light. Suddenly, the image of the late Duchess flashed before the man's eyes. She seemed to be looking right at him, a gentle smile on her face. With trembling, slender fingers, he slowly reached out, only for the beautiful illusion to shatter into nothingness the moment his fingertips brushed the air. Perhaps it was a punishment for his utter failure as a father. Images of his daughter suddenly flooded his mind. He didn't even know when it happened, but Chessa had somehow carved out an irreplaceable space in his heart. Maybe it started when her gentle fingers brushed through his hair to comfort him, or maybe he had simply grown completely used to having her by his side day after day. At that thought, he clenched his fists tightly. He absolutely hated it when people just vanished like this. It was just like his wife's sudden passing. Staring at his own reflection in the mirror, a sudden thought struck him. It was time to go see his old master. Duke Evroy was one of the Empire's 3 great nobles, and undeniably its most supreme, top-tier mage. Her powerfully built frame towered even over average men, and she possessed a uniquely deep, utterly captivating voice. Her immense magic kept her body perpetually youthful, which was why she was a constant, dazzling presence at high society banquets. Despite her youthful looks and terrifying power, there was only one person in the world who could easily get under her skin. She thought she was hallucinating for a second. Keen's sudden, unannounced arrival practically gave her a heart attack. She hurled her wine glass right at him, but he dodged it effortlessly. What the hell happened? Don't tell me you barged in here just to have me put out that massive fire at your estate. Keen stayed completely silent for a moment before finally spitting it out. His youngest daughter was missing, and he desperately needed her help to find her. Dropping down on one knee, Keen gently grasped the woman's hand. Master. That single word left her completely stunned. It was as if she was looking at that earnest, young boy all over again. That nostalgic title slyly bypassed every single one of her carefully built emotional walls. Left with no other choice, Evroy threw down a condition. She wanted Keen's third child, Basil, to officially become her disciple. In her eyes, that boy possessed an absolutely extraordinary talent for magic. Even though Basil had flat out refused before. After this whole mess, he'd definitely have to reconsider. At this point, Evroy looked up, her face full of suspicion. Why are you going to such crazy lengths for an adopted child? But Keen offered no explanation. That massive fire still needed dealing with. He had only come to his old master out of pure desperation. After all, using dark magic was a massive taboo within the Empire. If Keen used his own dark magic, it would easily bring the terrifying heresy Inquisitors hunting right for him. But if Evroy cast the spell, there wouldn't be any risk at all. However, the spell required either the target's hair or a blood relative's blood to work. Keen didn't say a word. He just gripped a sharp blade and slashed right across his own palm. Bright red blood dripped steadily from his hand into a glass vial. Seeing the profound confusion on the woman's face, Keen explained that Chessa was definitely with his eldest son. Evroy grabbed the vial, and a violently powerful surge of magic instantly erupted from her hands. Meanwhile, miles away, Belle was holding his little sister tightly, fast asleep. But a terrifying pulse of magical energy shocked Chessa wide awake in a split second. A massive, blindingly bright magic circle suddenly materialized right above them on the ceiling. Seeing its unique, intricate patterns, Chessa instantly recognized it as a high-level tracking spell. But the color was all wrong. It definitely wasn't cast by Keen. To have magic capable of such an insanely precise, long-range track made the girl guess the caster's true identity in a heartbeat. The crimson blood flowed right along Evroy's magical feather, piercing straight through the magic circle to lock directly onto Chessa's exact location. The terrified girl didn't even have a second to process how Evroy and Keen were connected. She couldn't afford to get caught right now, and that exact same magic would be completely useless against Evroy, the great mage. In the very next breath, a unique fairy power erupted wildly from within the girl's body. She had to completely shatter the magic circle before it could fully form. The little fairy was quite proud of her own genius idea. A delicate flower bloomed right in the palm of her hand. First, she used the sleep-inducing flower to soothe the slumbering Belle. You see, fairies nowadays are on the absolute brink of extinction. Lacking any real offensive power, their only option when facing an enemy is to just avoid the fight altogether. But Chessa was totally different. She unleashed her attacks without a shred of hesitation. The tiny little Chessa suddenly whipped out a massive, terrifying axe. The razor-sharp double-edged blade sliced effortlessly through the ground. Well then, let's give them a taste of the great fairy's true power.